And good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us here tonight on Living Matter Church Live. We are so happy when you guys come in and tune in and share the broadcast that we've been given in ministry all week long. And tonight is Thursday night, and you know what this program is. It's Science, Philosophy, and Metaphysics with Dr. Pandit. So at this opportunity, I want you guys, hey, tag and share. Copy that link and share with friends and family, coworkers, your neighbors, and let them know that this is the program that they definitely want to make sure they tune into tonight. And as always, make sure that if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat and we will highlight them during the question and answer period. So at this time, I'd like to bring before you the one and only Dr. Pandit.
Hello and welcome again. Those of you who have been with us all along, welcome. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome to you again. Well, not again, but welcome. We will do a little bit of a review. So let's just get on with the frames right now and start the review and then get on to today's topic. So we are talking about a search with science, philosophy, and metaphysics. And in that search, we decided that it would be done in a certain way. We described those ways, and we have been doing this now for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So let's have a short review. As neutral inquirers, we ask the question, does God really exist? And then we engaged in pan process as neutral inquirers. The pan process, we said, would be fair and unbiased, so we'd look at both sides of the question. God exists, God does not exist. And for that, we had to use 4 columns of argument, 2 on each side, pro and a con. So column 1 would be arguments for atheism, column 2, arguments against theism, column 3, arguments for theism, column 4, arguments against atheism. And when we did all 4, step back, we realized that the overwhelming weight of evidence showed that, based on scientific information and sound philosophy, the existence of God is a rational, intellectually credible claim. We saw that. But we also said that if there are any challenges to it, we should look at that as well. You remember Muhammad Rusht, who said you should look at the opposite side as well. So whenever there is uh, a contrary claim, we should examine that as well. The contrary claim is the theory of evolution. So we should honestly look at that. Today, we're going to look at the theory of evolution, the first one. Next week will be the second one. Today is just the fundamentals. But before that, 4 quick premises or earlier comments. Here are the 4. Reason to examine evolution. Why would we examine this at all? Well, if the theory of evolution has a reasonable scientific base, then the study of nature could show that God is not needed. And deism is probably true. What's deism? The idea that God started everything and then he just cut off himself from the rest of his creation and went maybe for a long walk and he has not come back yet. That is deism. Whereas if evolution is not reasonable and scientific, then the study of nature could endorse the claim that God is essential in our universe and therefore he is factual and in existence. Number 2, what's the meaning of evolution? The word itself means gradual changes resulting in improvement over a period of time. The fact is, it happens all the time. Evolution happens all the time. So don't get head up when somebody says it's evolution. However, the theory of evolution, that expression stands for a specific type of evolution described by Charles Darwin. The starting point was a simple one-celled organism which gradually changed, and over vast periods of time, it resulted in the entire spectrum of living organisms in the world today. So what is that spectrum? Here it is. You start with species, and then the species can make variations and subspecies in breeds and races. But when it shifts to another species and then another, and it can go on to the next classification, which is called genus. And so from species, we go to genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, domain. When you look at that first one, the species can form variations and breeds. That is called microevolution, small amounts. Whereas the theory of evolution is actually one species becoming another and then going on to genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, and domain. So, what are the concepts of evolution? The word evolution is used so broadly that we should define what we are talking about. We can have, number one, cosmic evolution. How did the universe start? Number two, stellar evolution. How did the stars and galaxies come about? And then we have inorganic evolution. How did the gases become actual solids like rocks and granite and gold? And then how did that inorganic material get organized into organic substances like cells? How did that happen? That would be organic evolution. And then how did that get alive? I have coined that term zoontic. Zo in Greek means life. So, how did a non life material become alive? What is that evolution? I've called it zoontic, but there are other technical terms. But it's still the same, this means the same. How did it get alive? Then, after that, comes Darwinian evolution, after things became alive. So, Darwinian evolution means it goes from one species to another. It's called macroevolution, jumps from a big jump. Among evolution, there is also something known, like I said, microevolution, micro, where a species can make variations and breeds and races. So we have macro, we have microevolution, and all these evolution, Darwinian evolution, is based on the first five. They all have to have occurred just in that manner. So now we go with this idea to what is the topic for today: fundamental features of the theory of evolution. So here are seven. Now there's no place where there are seven set. I just picked them out from wherever they talked about evolution, and especially from this book, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. And here are the seven: that all the forms on earth are connected by genealogy. Genealogy means parent child relationship. Number two, structural changes affect survival. Number three, evolution is a spontaneous process. Number four, natural selection caused evolution. Number five, natural selection is a rational concept. Number six, the requirement of time, we'll go into it. And number seven, evolution has been scientifically proven. These factors are foundational, just fundamental to the theory of evolution. So here's a statement we're going to make right now. If even one cannot be established, the theory becomes suspect. I'm going to say it again. If even one cannot be established, the theory becomes suspect. So all seven must be settled. So let's look at them one by one. Genealogical connection, like we said, it means it has to be connected, parent to child, child becomes parent, and then on and on. Here are the words from the book I just showed you, Origin of Species. The natural system, what's in the world today, is genealogical in its arrangement, like a pedigree. All true classification, he says in his book, is genealogical. And at the same time, he confesses in page 337, we have no written pedigree. And Henry G., the science reporter for Nature, says and agrees, no fossil is buried with its birth certificate, so you don't know where it is. Darwin again, we never know the exact character of the common ancestor. It's extremely difficult to even conjecture. That means guess. Impossible to conceive, that you can't even imagine. In other words, when you see a certain fossil, you cannot guess or even imagine what was just before it or even what was just after it. We are unable to do that. So, Here's an example, and that's from the book again. Vertebrates have descended from an ancient prototype of which we know nothing. Then how do you know it's connected? He used the words unknown progenitor of vertebrata, that group, unknown starting point of the articulator, that group. So, how do we know the connections? This is how he said: we have to make out community of descent, genealogy of connection by resemblances of any kind. In other words, you look for the similarities of features. And when you are similar, you put them together, dissimilar, put them in another group. So, similarities, he says, points to genealogy, which then give the basis for the classification. Wait a minute, look at that carefully. Similarities then can go straight to classification. Give you a simple example. Suppose we say this bush has small leaves, and then these bushes have medium sized leaves, and those bushes have large leaves. Well, we can study the small leaves, the medium sized leaves, and the large leaves without ever saying that the small ones became medium sized and the medium sized became large. Did you see that? We do not need to connect them by became. Just study them, and when you see the features, you can classify them. In other words, we classify. If you classify based on similarities, we do not need genealogy at all. So the theory of evolution is not needed because the theory of evolution is based on genealogy. Here's history. Carolus Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, the one who actually made the classification, he was a creationist, lived at least a century before Charles Darwin. He gave us our present system of biological classification. He didn't need genealogy at all in his work. Like I said, he lived a century before Charles Darwin. So we ask today, how is genealogy established? And here are the words of Charles Darwin himself: it needs a link of small intermediates, of small changes that connect one to the other. And look at his words: you need many of these intermediate links, and they should form nearly perfect chain. Only then can you say this one became this. A became B only when A went through small steps, and we could see those steps, identify those steps, and it went in one smooth chain. In the world today, in all the museums of the world, we have about 250,000 species of fossils. Not a single chain has been found connecting any two fossils. So, what is the basis of the theory then? And you hear the word missing links all the time. Oh, we found this missing link. Oh, we found that missing link. Look, the words missing links are extremely misleading because it portrays a chain connecting two species that is nearly complete and is deficient only in one or maybe two links. But that's not the picture really. The whole chain is missing in every instance. So nobody should ever use the word missing link. The concept of links is valid only when a chain is present. Think, where is the chain in which the links are missing? So you first have to get the chain. Think critically, think rationally, my friends. To take a line of fossils and claim that they represent lineage or a line, connected line, is not a scientific hypothesis, but an assertion that carries the same validity as a bedtime story. It is effectively impossible to link fossils into chains of cause and effect in any valid way. Each fossil represents an isolated point with no knowable connection to any other fossil, and all float around in an overwhelming sea of gaps. That was Henry G., science reporter, in his book In Search of Deep Time. Why did he say that? Because we have a species here and here separated by, say, 1,000,000 years. How do you say they're connected at all? Suppose I said I was a descendant of Alexander the Great. I puffed up my chest, Alexander the Great. And you ask me, hey, how come you're claiming that? And I say, yeah, he's my ancestor. So is there anyone between you and him that you can put onto the line there? Oh, no, I can't put anybody, but I am his descendant. How will that sound? And this is only about 2,500 years. What if it's 1,000,000 years? Can you see now? There is no knowable connection between the species. It is just made up because there is a theory there. Evidence missing. Genealogy has never been proved. Let's take a short break. All right, let's carry on. Number two of the fundamentals of the evolution, the claim that structural changes are required. The theory of evolution is built on the idea that changes in anatomy and physiology provided greater fitness for survival. In other words, here are the words. The slightest difference of structure or constitution would be preserved. So if it's a small change in structure, well, that will be held. And then another small one, that also will be held. But at the same time, here's a confession which is found on page 156 of the book Origin of Species. Habits have changed without a corresponding change in structure. Think about it now. In other words, if a habit can change, we don't need a change in structure at all. Got it? If habits have changed. So habits then can also help survival and fitness. So if habits can do that, we don't need structural changes at all. Right now, for example, let's look at the structure of the neck. The neck. We have giraffes. You know how long those necks are. Those giraffes are living in the same locality as gorillas, which have very short necks, and those gorillas are looking or are living in the same locality as little centipedes, which have no neck at all. So where's the need of that structure? If all of them are living in the same place happily and have been doing it for millennia, thousands of years, then you don't need a change at all. In fact, the word habits have changed would be the explanation. We don't need change at all, the change of structure at all. So here's an animal, for example, the one that was before the giraffe. He didn't have that long a neck. So the theory says he had to grow that neck. Somehow it had to come about. But if you say habits have changed, then instead of eating the leaves down here, he could have just got up on his hind legs and ate the leaves up there. He didn't need to stretch his neck. You know what I mean? If you say habits have changed, then habits could have caused all the changes. And in effect, we don't need any change at all. They just changed their habits and survived. You don't need to become another species at all. You can survive as yourself. A little virus stays a virus all the time and just changes his habit a bit. So the need for structural changes has not been established. How about number three, a spontaneous process? Natural selection claims to completely eliminate purpose, intelligence, volition, choice. It is claimed to be a spontaneous, undirected process based on chance and randomness. However, here's something that we should know. The source of the concepts of the theory of evolution didn't come from a study of nature. The components of the theory were borrowed from the breeding experiments of Charles Darwin. This is clearly seen in the way this book is arranged. This book. You know what the first chapter is? The first chapter of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, is variation under domestication. In that, he described the process of breeding his own. He did a lot of breeding, by the way. After the first comes the second, and it's only in the second chapter he talks about variation taking part in nature. What he did was he transferred the principles from his experiments to his theory. And here's words: as man can do what he himself did in the breeding experiment, so nature could. Really? Okay, let's take that and let's look at his own words that is written in the book itself. 5 statements. He's talking about the breeding experiments, and I have highlighted the word breeder for a specific reason, but I've quoted it. I have not put it there myself. So the word breeder, watch it in all the 5 statements. Number 1, it would seem as if they, the breeder, had chalked upon a wall a form and given it existence. How? By doing the breeding experiments. Number 2, eminent breeders try by methodical selection with a distinct object in view to make a new strain. Number 3, the closest attention should be paid, even the slightest deviation, unless such attention is paid by the breeder, obviously, nothing can be effected. Number 4, the all important part which selection by man, he says, but I've put the word breeder just so that we'll have consistency in what we are saying. The all important part which selection by the breeder, not by nature, by the breeder has played. And number 5, not one man in 1,000 has accuracy of eye and judgment sufficient to become an eminent breeder. Did you get the point? The central focus is the breeder, who must have these following abilities. He should be able to draw the picture of what he wants to accomplish, have a plan and an aim, pay attention, be alive, be alert, weigh out the factors, and make decisions in the right direction. Therefore, if these factors are faithfully and accurately transferred from breeding experiments to nature, we should find the equivalent of the breeder in nature also. Got it? If you say that this is what happened here and therefore if the same thing happened here, then the factors over here should also be found here. The above 6 factors can be found only in a living, thinking agent, the breeder, who can make deliberate, thoughtful decisions. That picture is completely opposite a spontaneous, undirected process, my friends. It is an irreconcilable contradiction to claim that evolution is spontaneous and yet it needs all of these factors. The first chapter of the book establishes the absolute necessity of these 6 characteristics that we listed, and they can be found only in living agents. Therefore, evolution cannot be classed as a spontaneous process. It was agent director, breeder director, and closely supervised. Number 4, natural selection caused evolution. Really? Here are his words. Natural selection can act only, got that word? Only by the preservation and accumulation of modifications. I've underlined and highlighted the word accumulation because that's the point we're looking at. Because Charles Darwin did not know modern genetics. He did not know that the change from one species to another would require a massive increase of genetic material. Nobody has described the source of that extra material. From where would it come? The word select will not allow you to end up with more than what was available. How simple can that be? If I asked you to select from this basket of 10 apples, you can't have 20 apples in your hand. You can have 5, 6, maximum 10. So if your parent mother had 10 units of genetic material and your father had 10 units and they each contributed 5, you will have only 10. Where's the accumulation? The word select will not allow you to have more. To accumulate, which is in that sentence up there, you would need to add. Catch, hold, and add. But there is no known method of adding. None has been provided for us, ever. That was a central question at the landmark Conference of Evolutionists in 1980 in Chicago. Here's the question: can the process of evolution add genetic material to the offspring, the one that came later, sufficient to form another species? Here's Roger Lewin, the science reporter for that conference, who said the answer can be given as a clear no. Because if mutations occur and they accidentally add, that upsets the balance and causes harm. And here are Darwin's own words: any variation in the least degree injurious would be rigidly destroyed. So, what are we looking at? The theory requires you to add, but if you add, it will become abnormal, and an abnormal one is immediately destroyed. So, where is evolution? Think, think very clearly, my friends. All the so-called beneficiary mutation, they say this has happened, it benefits, that is true, but they involve at the genetic level, it involves a reduction, a breakup, or just a rearrangement of the genetic material. Yes, they will talk about pesticide resistance and change of the color and moths or fishes, resistance to malaria. None has been connected to an increased amount of DNA, and no new species was ever formed in those experiments and in the examples that are listed or that are given. Here's information: viruses in their genetic material have 1/20th, only 5% of what humans have in their cells, the DNA material. So, how did humans get that 95%? From where? Without a source of that extra DNA and a mechanism to add DNA, evolution cannot take place. So, natural selection, which can only select, cannot add, did not cause evolution. Is natural selection a rational concept? The definition of natural selection is given by Darwin on page 75 of his book, and here are the words: this preservation of favorable variations and the rejection of injurious variations I call natural selection. So, two things are happening: you preserve and you reject. Can you see that? Preserve, reject. And he calls it natural selection. Those two words are what we're going to look at just now. Selection, as soon as you hear the word selection, it would depict knowledge of what is favorable and what is not favorable. Knowledge of the possible outcomes and correct predictions, knowledge of the laws of cause and effect, knowledge of aims and purposes. You need a whole lot of knowledge to make choices. And this is selection, which is a form of a choice. The second word there is natural. Natural depicts that which is undirected, unsupervised, random, and purposeless, where knowledge is not necessary at all. You don't need any knowledge to be random. Did you get that? So these concepts are at odds, and actually they are contradictory. Anything natural cannot select, because selection requires information and thought processes. Giving a process in nature, the human characteristics of physical activity and energy, mental acuity and life, as if it can do things and choose, is called reification. It is justified in poetry and prose. You can't say natural selection did this because it didn't do anything. It cannot be the basis of scientific theories. So the correct combination, now watch this, the correct combination should be either natural randomness or intelligent selection. Natural selection is an oxymoron. It is not a rational expression. Let's take a break. All right, we've done a few. Let's carry on. Number 6. Goodness, we've done 5. Requirement of time. This is really very decisive. I want you to follow carefully. The dominant thinking in Darwin's day was that the earth was only a few thousand years old. They got it from the Bible. That was England in those days. But soon after that, when Charles Darwin was trying to figure this out, Charles Lyell wrote out a book called Principles of Geology, in which he said, no, 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 not just thousands, it can be millions of years. So, with certain ideas that they put into their calculations, today the estimated ages are the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Billion years. And the universe is about 13.72 billion years. Got that? Earth is about 4.53 billion years. By the way, that is not the period of Darwinian evolution. That's when the Earth started to be formed, according to the theory. Evolution began only about 0.53 billion years ago. So, complex life on this Earth started only about 0.53 billion years ago. That's important because we want to look at the question. The question is not whether these ages are wrong or correct, but even if they are correct, whether this period is sufficient to get the job of evolution done according to the principles in the theory. The fact is, they are utterly insufficient. You really need so much more of time if you really want to know how it occurred. Evolution requires far more time than the 13.72 billion years. We're going to look at 3 examples. Number 1, G.G. Simpson, an ardent evolutionist. He looked at the bat's wing. The bat's wing is not feathers, it's a fine membrane. So it's unusual. So, how long would it take to form the bat's wing by the theory of evolution, by the principles in that theory? It would have to start before the beginning of the earth. That is the calculation. The earth is 4.53 billion years, but complex life is only 0.53 billion years. And this little part of one mammal requires more time than the whole age of the earth. Not enough. Number 2, Darwin's book has only one diagram. I'll show it to you just fleetingly, just to give you an idea that I am quoting from the book itself. Here we go. It's page 103 and 104. It's the only diagram in the book. It gives those lines you saw, and each line was so many thousand millions of generations. So what I did was I did a calculation. And according to one of my calculations, I won't show it to you exactly now. You can ask for it if you want in the Q&A time. My calculation, the elephant would require 30 billion years to just become a variety. And there's only one. Look, there are at least 1 million other species. So this one required 30 billion years. Number 3, galaxies 12 billion light years away have been detected. They say they're 12 billion light years away. All the galaxies are moving out, and they're moving quite fast. Our Milky Way galaxy is moving at the speed of 600 kilometers per second, which means about 19 billion kilometers per year. So if that is 12 billion light years away, that galaxy, even if it was speeding away at 10 times the speed of the Milky Way galaxy, it would require 7,000 billion years to get there. So the whole universe does not afford enough time for evolution. Therefore, either the way we're computing time or the theory itself is suspect, because it is not harmonizing. If you say it happened and you need this much of time, and you don't have that much of time. You can't crush 7,000 billion years into 13 billion years, my friends. That is too much of a change. So there's a big question, right? It's very big a question. Number 7, the last one that we're going to look at today. Evolutionary scientists today treat the theory as if it is a proven scientific fact. When I was talking once at the University of Arkansas, there were 5 atheistic professors in the front row, and they called the theory of evolution not just a theory, they called it the law of evolution. They take it to be absolute fact. But really, if you read the book, Origin of Species, it just falls apart. Here is a statement by Professor George Levine of Rutgers University, who wrote the introduction to the book. And the introduction is here in this book. Look what he says. Nobody knew better than Darwin what he had failed to prove. And here are Darwin's own words, concurring. When we descend to the details, we cannot prove that a single species has changed, nor can we prove that the supposed changes were beneficial, which is the groundwork of the theory. So what was Darwin holding on to? He looked to the future. And here are the words: future geologists discovering in a fossil state numerous intermediate gradations. In other words, that chain that we talked about, smooth chain, we should find that, he said. Based on that finding, his theory was set. But after 160 years today, we haven't found even one chain connecting any 2 species. So Oswald Spengler said these words: there is no more conclusive refutation of Darwinism than that furnished by paleontology, the study of fossils, and that's the one they all point to as their basis for their theory. There is not the slightest evidence that any one group of the major groups arose from any other. Each fossil represents an isolated point with no knowable connection to any other fossil, and all float around in an overwhelming sea of gaps. These words from Colin Patterson, they were spoken at a lecture. He's from England, and he came to America, to New York, and he spoke to the American scientists, and this is what he said: we've tested it. It means the theory of evolution, and it has been falsified precisely. Evolution conveys no knowledge, but seems to convey anti-knowledge, which is harmful to systematics. And we can't go into it right now, but if you want to read that whole transcript, it is available on the internet. Exactly what he said. I'm quoting from that transcript. So not only has the theory of evolution not been proved, it has been disproved, and worse, it has been shown to be harmful and actually anti-science. Evolution then has not been proved. So here are the 7 fundamental features we looked at today. Structural changes, they don't have to be there for survival. Evolution is a spontaneous process? Of course not. It was very heavily supervised. Natural selection cannot cause evolution because selection can only result in the same or reduced amount of genetic material. Selection as a rational concept? No, the words natural and selection do not harmonize. They are an oxymoron. The requirement of time is simply too much. And evolution has been scientifically proven? Of course not. It has not only not been proven, it has been disproven. And we had said right in the beginning, if even one cannot be established, the theory becomes suspect. And what have we found? Not even one has been established. Think critically, my friend. What's critically? You do the thinking. Think rationally. What's rationally? You give a reason. With those words, Q&A session.
Everyone has been glued to what you have been saying at this point, Dr. Pandit, and thank you for the refresher. Um, if you can do me a favor, I'm going to try. Can you put that last slide up that talked about the seven as a refresher? And we do have a question in the chat. I will go to ask that question.
If you can
Put
put
that
it
in here.
up there,
Yep,
yeah, I
right
put,
there.
yeah, there
Here we
you
go.
go.
Here we go. Just as a reminder for everyone, please if you want to take the opportunity to take a screenshot of this, that will be awesome. So you can use that as a point of reference as we continue on to, as a refresher, and to the next segment of the series. But I want an opportunity for you to have that available to you. All right, I'm
You
going to.
know, Patrice, that's the reason I put uh, these frames on the screen, because some of them are actually quite detailed and actually accurately in their words.
Yeah,
So it's good to, if you can take a screenshot. That's why I put it up there so that you don't have to remember what I said. Just take a screenshot, and those are the exact words you should use to make up your own mind.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to give another 10 seconds for a screenshot, and we're going to move it out of the frame. Here we go. All right, so we have the earlier question from Deborah Haling. I'm going to put this up here for everyone to see. And her question was, why does intelligent people still choose to believe Darwin's claims even though they have a mind to reason what makes sense?
The why questions are very interesting. um, they're very broad usually. So, how shall I put it? Try to avoid the word why. Try to come to a point and ask about that one point. In other words, the question could have been, what is it that makes them choose? Is it this or is it that? That's the way we choose. Why are very broad questions, and they're difficult really to pinpoint. So, still, it's a very good question, because that's where you start. Why do I mean really smart people, still believe in evolution?
Hmm.
Number one, they have not. They have not looked at it the way we looked at it today. I've been to, like I said, all over the world. I've spoken on 5 continents to smart people, especially on university campuses. And all of them are evolutionists. I mean, many of them are evolutionists to whom I speak. And they are just sold out on it. Why? Number one, like I said, they have not looked at it in this manner. Because when you look at it in this manner, oh goodness, how can you continue? And so many of them have come and told me, hey, the game is up. There's no way you can go along with this. Number two, those who really talk a lot about evolution, and I've seen this over and over again, even those who teach evolution have never read this book. This is their reference. But I'm telling you, from what I've seen, over 90% of them have never read the book. First of all, it's not easy reading.
Hmm.
I picked it up because I wanted to read it. It took me 3 months to read it just once. You know why? Because one of the things, it's the archaic type of medieval English,
Hmm.
and those sentences can form the whole paragraph, one sentence.
Hmm.
So you have to know which adjective and adverb connects to which other subject or object. And so you got to go slowly. It took me 3 months to read it just once. I read it 3 times before I began to form an idea of what Darwin was trying to say.
Hmm.
Only after the fourth time, I took up my pen and started making marks on the book. And after the fifth time, then I started connecting some words on page 210 to the one sentence on 302, from page 110 to page 56 or something. I began to do that. And after the seventh time when I read it, then I could say, now I know something of actually what Charles Darwin was trying to say. And here's what I found: he destroys his whole theory in
Mm,
his own book. That is one of the reasons I think that smart people will not be able to look at it. You got to see it. You got to go through it. You got to find out, why is he saying this here and why is he saying that one over there. And when you put it together, one destroys the other, and actually the whole theory comes out to be quite baseless,
no.
like I showed you today. If you just look at the words, so smart people, they have not seen it the way we have seen it. They have not read his book carefully. They have just swallowed what somebody else says, and it makes good sense to them because they don't like the idea of creation, they don't like the idea of God. And so this is so much smarter. It appears to be so much smarter, but really it is not all that smart when you look at it carefully and actually go with piecemeal, one point after another. It breaks down. So I can give you these two obvious reasons. The other one, like I said, when you have a certain world view in your mind, you tend to interpret everything according to that world view. By the way, this question of not reading, it applies to the Christian world as well. It's nearly the same. 90% of those who talk very loudly about Christianity has never read the Bible through and through. No, they have not. The same thing as that. Both sides speaking from a position of ignorance and blindness. That is why you have so much of confusion. I wish you would read your own book and ask them also to read their own book, and then both of you and us are informed. And when you are informed, then you can have a good discussion. If you are not informed, it'll be chaos and confusion. Anyway, have I given
Oh
some
no,
idea?
no, absolutely. And if there are a couple more questions, and I wanted to put spark the thought as you were just answering the question, and obviously giving even more questions, even if the answer was for me one of the things that even though I was pretty much raised in the church, and but being raised in the church does not necessarily cultivate faith. It just puts you in a place where you're in an environment that you kind of have to explore still on your own. Um, but even those points of doubt moments throughout my experience, one of the things about questioning, well, even for myself, is this God really who He says He is? I mean, we go to church each week. We have these quote unquote rituals that we do each week, and things that we go to church, we go to Sabbath school, the whole nine yards. But there's still that question of, am I doing this for naught? Like, what is this really all about? Um, but one thing about for me that settled the question was the moral principle. Because if you're talking about a Big Bang theory, a Big Bang theory does not give you morals. It's just an expansion of what they're considering an evolutionary process, the whole nine yards, but it does not give you a sense of morality. It's just it's an energy
Yes.
that's still just going on and on and on.
What you're describing, Patrice, is another angle from which you approach the same big question of God's existence. In fact, the question of morality, we have not touched on it, but it's a huge one. We can't touch on everything, so I've just picked out a few.
Mhm.
The question of morality is huge, and if anyone wants to really get into it, they'll go along with what you are saying, because where is, for morality, you have to use the word ought or should. You ought to do this, you should do this.
Mhm.
Once you say that, you are agreeing that you are referring to something that is above both you and the person you're talking to.
Correct.
And when you go that further and further, you'll have to come to a point that is above the whole human race. You can't have morality by this group saying this and that group saying that. You have to have morality in which there is a supreme point which actually supervises that morality.
Yeah.
Do you know that when people have tried to look at this, it has entered into the very idea of jurisprudence, of courts of law,
Mm-hmm.
where they keep on saying one thing is when you look at laws that humans have made, where did those where did the idea of law come from? We're not talking about laws now, we're talking about the brute fact of law. That is totally unexplained by humans. And so you have to come to a conclusion, or a concept which is called the law of laws, the rule of rules,
Mm-hmm.
way above there. And it is a part of jurisprudence, my friends. So if you really, it's rational, in other words, that
Yeah.
you can come to it. It's a huge, huge point. Yeah, good point, Patrice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's my thought process. So I don't want to get become a
There
dialogue.
was somebody on the chat who used the word Satan. I
I
am
I saw that.
I am suggesting that you don't go to those words because they mean nothing to an atheist or an evolutionist. So we're not dealing with those words now. We're dealing with only science, philosophy, and then with those two, we are going to do metaphysical. If we start with a belief system already,
Yeah.
then we are not making our case to the public.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the whole process, the whole purpose also of this is for you to have a growing knowledge for yourself and come to a conclusion of whether or not you believe truly that God exists through these principles. So I want to go to another question. Okay, so this actually going to come up a little earlier. This is from, if I hope I'm pronouncing it, Romaine. My brother-in-law believes that there is a God, but does not believe in Jesus. Is there any proof that Jesus exists?
Once again, a very good question. We should be careful in the way we use words. When you do metaphysical topics, there is no such thing as proof. Is there ultimate proof? There is. But humans have no way of reaching that and bringing it here and saying this is the proof. When you do metaphysical topics, we do what is called abductive reasoning. In other words, you look at the possibilities and look for the evidence, and that's why we use the word weight of evidence. So, good question. Shall I change it to just a little bit? Is there any weight of evidence that Jesus exists? So, when you look for a weight of evidence, you can't go to the Bible because that's the place where his story is written. So you're asking really, and I am hoping that this is the question you're asking: is there any evidence of the existence of Jesus outside the Bible? If there is, then it forms a form. It's a form of evidence. If it's inside the Bible, then it's circular reasoning. The Bible is talking about Jesus, so it'll of course agree that he exists. Now, if you talk about that, we're going to come to that, by the way. We are just talking now about the existence of God. So we have to go step by step. But since you have asked, I'm going to answer it, because when it comes, it will be a repetition, and repetition is always good for those who want to learn. So let me tell you right now, there's plenty of evidence of the existence of Jesus outside the Bible. Plenty. In fact, the words of, I think it's F.F. Bruce, who's a very well known theologian. He says, there is more proof for Jesus than there is for Julius Caesar. So if you believe Julius Caesar was a Roman emperor, well, then you have to believe that Jesus also lived. There is evidence for the existence of Jesus outside the Bible in secular writings. Did you know that? Yes, in secular
Mhm.
writings is there. He is also mentioned in other religious writings, not Christian. Can you imagine Jesus being mentioned in other religious writings? And he is also mentioned in Christian writing outside the Bible. So these three: secular writings, religious writings which are non Christian, and Christian writings which are outside the Bible. You put all those three, they are there. Of course, he existed. He's a historical figure. We will come to that later on, because now we are doing existence of God. Later on, we'll have to ask, what is the identity of that God? Does he have a name? That's when we get into this questions, and I think we will enjoy that.
Awesome. We're going to have two more questions, and please know that if you have any additional questions, and I do see them in the chat, I will forward those on to Dr. Pandit to answer at another time. So let's. This one is from Charlotte Stanforth. Her question is science. Well, no, she says science is very popular and people want to appear intelligent. But, well, that that may be so. Um, let's
Well,
take.
let me comment on that.
Okay.
This is absolutely true. And that is why people have proposed theistic evolution. They want God to do it this way, their way of evolution, because evolution, they say, is scientific. So you want to appear like you can speak in scientific terms, and so there are a lot of Christians who lean on to evolution. In fact, the Catholic Church, the Pope, agrees to theistic evolution. Why? Because they feel that evolution itself is so nicely, clearly stated that you can't challenge it. So instead of challenging it, why don't you put God with it? But I am saying, hey, wait a minute. It can be challenged in its own terms
Yeah.
of science. In fact, that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to ask, is evolution scientific? And we're going to look at the criteria which make anything scientific and see whether evolution fits that. And so, let me tell you right now, it is not scientific. So, if it is not scientific, why do you want to put the God with an unscientific theory? There's no need to do that, my friend. Just stay where you are, because creationism, we're not looking at it right now, has far more rational evidence than evolution. Like we saw today, evolution cannot stand its ground. So when you look at these two theories, evolution and creationism, we can't pit them immediately, but we can ask in what is called the hypothetic approach. We can say, okay, if this is the case, what should we see? If this is the case, what should we see? In other words, what does this theory predict? And what does this theory predict of what we should find on Earth today? And you find that this theory of evolution does not predict what we see on Earth today. Whereas, amazingly, the creation story predicts far more of what we should see in the world today in natural science. So, on weight of evidence, remember we said no proof, weight of evidence, it looks that if you look at it clearly, scientifically, we are stating a direction of thinking. So, yes, people like to be intelligent and to be scientific, but wait a minute, do it correctly so that it's really scientific.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, there's an interesting. There are a couple of interesting questions here, and I'm going to just for the point of reference because that's someone is asking for a couple of the sources. So here's the question: is where can we find this evidence of Jesus outside the Bible? So are there a couple of books you can mention?
Um, Look, this is not the question we're asking right now. You're jumping to about 3 or 4 sessions ahead. I know how it feels, because you say, "Hey, I believe this. I need that." What we're doing, my friends, is settling this, because this is not settled.
Mm,
No use going to Jesus unless you settle all of this now. If you go straight to Jesus, your foundation will be weak. Your foundation, when the storm comes, will be wobbly.
understand.
No, we want to settle this now. So, your question again? What? Where's the sources? Let me see. Now, it's a good question, by the way. I'm not throwing it out. I'm just saying don't go to that until you have settled this, all that we are doing right now.
Okay.
Otherwise, you want to be a preacher, you want to tell everyone, hey, this. But when they ask you about what we discussed today, ooh, we get all stuck, and then your credibility goes down. So you can't talk about Jesus after that. if your credibility goes down on this question. So the places, look up, for example, it's a big compendium, The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. It's hundreds of pages, but there you will find evidence of Jesus outside the Bible. Very nicely written out. I mean, it's so many pages there. It's a good place. The other place is A Skeptic's Search for God by Ralph Muncaster. Ralph Muncaster, Muncaster, A Skeptic's Search for God. You might find some there. But the big one would be The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. There are others too. Josh has written another book, More Than a Carpenter. That's another one, More Than a Carpenter. Look at that as well. I'm just saying it offhand right now.
Yeah, I think it was just more just giving a couple of sources because you did mention that there are some sources outside the Bible that prove that. So I think that was good in terms of just giving them that, give them a couple of references. All right, this one I think is actually kind of co-signing what you were saying earlier. This is from Michelle Watson Grant. The Bible says that the earth was without form and void at the beginning, which seems to suggest that God created that raw material ions ago, and 6,000 years ago, he decided to do something with it. Thoughts? Eons ago. Got it.
Yeah, that's right. This is another common way of trying to split Genesis 1:1, to say that he created the earth and then after he created everything and then it was void, and then he did something about that void and without form, and he did something else. If you cut it there, you're going to have a little problem, because you have to ask yourself, why are you doing that? Number one, the why question is very important. Why would you cut it? Why would you say that there are two different creations then? The moment you say there are two different creations, then you should be able to supply some evidence that there are two creations. And the whole of the Bible never ever mentions two creations. Anywhere, it always mentions only one. So, what we are saying, my friends, is that there was only one creation. When he did everything, all the universe and the earth, it was at the same time. So, do we have any evidence in science that it might have been done together? Yes, if you notice, I'm not sure which one, the first or the second of our series, when I said, I'll give you just one example. I said, when you look at the mass of the universe, okay, the mass of the universe, which is now known universe, 1 trillion galaxies, each galaxy about 100 million stars. When you look at that mass that was formed at the beginning point, we know from mathematics and from astrophysics that if you had removed, I don't have the coin with me, 1 penny's worth of mass, if you had removed, the universe wouldn't have come into existence. If you had added just that 1 penny's worth of mass, the universe could not have formed. So we're not talking about just this earth separate from the universe. That's what I'm trying to say. You do not separate them. They're all tied together. All the laws of the universe are found on this earth, in the moon, in the sun, in our galaxy, next galaxy, and a galaxy 10 trillion miles away. All of them were formed with one central source of command. And that is why when historians of science look at how science, our modern science, came into being, they say that it had to be a monotheistic God that did it. One God doing the whole thing. So it can't be one God doing Jupiter and then thinking about the earth one day and then thinking about the sun another day. No, everything had to come together. So I would suggest that if you keep it together, the first verse of that chapter, if you keep it together, it still makes good sense.
Awesome. Well, we thank everybody for joining us tonight. As you can tell, these questions are going to get deeper and a little more complex in terms of our understanding. But I'm so thankful for Dr. Pandit's patience to answer every question. And as he always says before, there is no question that is
Dumb.
dumb. That's the word he
You
used.
know, yeah, there's a question out there, if you don't mind.
Hmm.
There's a question out there, if you don't mind, I will just comment on.
Which
It
one?
says, what is the substance of faith?
Okay, let's pull that up. What is the substance of faith? Okay.
Can you see it? It's on the chats. I can
Yeah,
see
and
it.
I'm going through this. I'm scrolling through the chats now. Oh, here it is. Here we are. Good evening. What is the substance of faith?
I'm guessing it is from the Bible. The Bible says the faith is the substance, right? So I'll just clarify one little thing, and then that should be enough to start off on this discussion. The difference between faith and belief. Belief is the ability to accept any claim as true. So somebody says something, you you accept it as true, that is belief. It has nothing to do whether the belief is true or false. So in other words, a belief can be utterly false. Faith is different. I like the definition by the late Benjamin Warfield from Princeton University. He said, faith is in all its exercises alike a form of conviction and therefore must necessarily be grounded in evidence. Belief without evidence is blind belief. Belief with evidence is faith. So now, another two quick things. Developing of faith requires evidence. You cannot have faith without evidence that the source is reliable, is dependable, is faithful. It's impossible to have faith in a person who you know is unfaithful. You have to have evidence that the person is reliable and is faithful, dependable. Now, once you develop that faith, now you have faith. Now you do not need faith to relate to that person again in a faith manner. So once you develop, when you express faith, you don't need evidence at all. Did you get the difference? To develop faith, you need evidence. To express faith, you need no evidence because you already found him to be faithful. So when you do that, faith itself becomes the evidence. Faith itself becomes the substance. What's the meaning of substance? Suppose you want a table made of wood. What is the substance? Wood. What's the product? Table. Now watch. Do you want strength? Bring the substance to God. Faith. Faith is the substance. He will give you strength. Do you want righteousness? Faith is the substance. Bring the substance. He will give you the product.
Mm.
Bring the substance, he will give you the product. You cannot form the product. Only God can form the product. You can bring the substance, and he's made it the easiest for anyone on earth. Simply bring your trust to me. I will give you the product of whatever you want. And that's why he said, I am. I am everything. I am everything. Bring your substance to me. I will give you the product. What a God we serve.
And what a God we serve. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pandit, for tonight's segment. This is getting more awesome every week. So, and for everyone that's watching, we thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Remember, you can watch the rebroadcast of that, and don't forget, hey, remember, take your screenshots if you need to. Even with the rebroadcast, you can go back, stop the video, take your screenshots, and share them. And don't forget to share the link. Share Living Matter Church, Power of the Land Ministries. And thank you so much for watching the broadcast tonight. And we will see you, God willing, next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a great night.